good morning, everybody. Let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to the first Third Thursday Web Forum of this shiny new year. I'm Hillary Morris, and as always, I work on user support and communications for both the Southeast and the South Atlantic Conservation Blueprints. And we host this webinar every third Thursday of the month right here at 10 a.m. to share the latest updates about the blueprint, get input and involvement from folks like y'all, and share exciting science in the world of landscape conservation in the Southeast region. So I'm just going to share our usual agenda for the day. I'll start out by introducing our speaker, who will present for 30 to 40 minutes on the monthly topic. There'll be Q&A and discussion at the end, and then I will wrap up by previewing next month's webinar and sharing some updates from your Blueprint staff. So today we are going to be hearing from Melissa Clark with the Nature Conservancy. She's with the Center for Resilient Conservation Science, and she's going to be talking about the latest updates to TNC's terrestrial resilience analysis. And this is particularly significant for SECAS because this new terrestrial resilience data is going to be used southeast-wide in the 2022 Southeast Blueprint. So this is an indicator that's really foundational to the blueprint, and we're very excited to incorporate these new updates to land cover and local connectedness in the 2022 Blueprint. So Melissa, I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to you. I want to make sure everybody's aware that we are recording just for the one or two folks who wanted to attend but had a conflict, and I'll post that link to the recording and to the slides on both the SECAS and the South Atlantic LCC websites within a couple of days. So with that, Melissa, I will hand things off to you.
Great, thank you, Hillary. Good morning. I'm Melissa Clark, a spatial ecologist for the Nature Conservancy. We have been busy over the last year. Today, I will be talking about the updates that we've been doing to the Resilient and Connected Network. I'm going to do a general overview of Resilient and Connected Network project, but I'm really going to focus on the updates. So if you have any questions during the talk, Hillary, if you could monitor the chat, that would be great.
Of course.
So feel free to type any questions you have in there, and then there's some time too for questions at the end. So one of the big changes that happened over the last year is that you're probably familiar with Mark and I as part of the Center Eastern Conservation Science, but we have a new name now. We are now the Center for Resilient Conservation Science, and our group was formed last year at the North America level of Nature Conservancy. Although our name is new, the staff have a long tenure and deep experience in conservation science. The mission of the Center for the Resilient Conservation Science is to provide the science, data, and tools and leadership needed to enable and achieve continental scale land and water conservation to sustain biodiversity in the face of a changing climate and other threats. And we have been working together for the last 10 years to develop the resilient and connected landscape analysis that I will be presenting today. So our group is spearheaded by Mark Anderson. And then I have fellow team members on the group, and we all work together to make this science possible, of Annalie Barnett, Arlene Olivero, Marta Rivera, John Prince, who has since retired, but we have to keep him in here because he's such a important part of our team and really helped with a lot of this analysis, Eric Martin, myself, and Mary Corey. And for all of this analysis, we couldn't do it alone. The analysis was guided by regional steering committees, and you'll hear a little bit about this later. And each of these regional steering committees had many scientists that help us draft and form the analysis. And the analysis was tailored to each region as we went along, and we learned some things, new methods, and that's going to come into play a little later as we talk about the landscape diversity component of the resilience sites. So I wanted to highlight at the beginning that we've completed the resilient sites analysis for all 50 states. Over the last year, we completed the last two, Alaska and Hawaii. And so for anyone that's new to this project, this resilient sites and resilience score estimates the capacity to maintain species diversity and ecological functions as the climate changes. And resilient sites are determined by evaluating physical characteristics of the landscape for each type of geophysical setting. So we're looking at characteristics that foster resilience, mainly landscape diversity and local connectedness. So the resilient site score is calculated within ecoregions based on cells of the same geophysical setting for landscape diversity and local connectedness. So along with calculating resilient sites for all 50 states, we also have calculated and created the resilient and connected network for all 50 states. And the resilient and connected network is a proposed conservation network of representative climate resilient sites that are designed to sustain biodiversity and ecological function into the future under a changing climate. So and the RCN is an overlay of climate resilient sites, which I just showed, areas of regional climate flow, and areas of recognized biodiversity. And as a scientist, these last two states, Alaska and Hawaii, were especially fun and interesting because it was fun to apply our methods that we've been doing in the continental United States to these completely new and different geographies. By having all of these 50 states done, we hope to be able to use the analysis at the federal level for programs like America the Beautiful and the Forest Legacy Program. So now I'm going to focus on what we've been doing and what's applicable to the Southeast. So I grew up in Delaware, and as we were growing up, our state motto was it's good to be first. And I feel like that way in the East with this resilient and connected network that it's good to be first. So as you know, we completed this analysis first in the East. We experimented and defined our methods for resilience in the RCN based on the geography that we really know and familiar with in the East. And you've had this data set a long time, so you've been really incorporating it into your conservation work. Although there are benefits to being first, there's also the analysis has been around for a while, and for some of it's getting out of date, like the local connectedness. And then we've also learned a few things as we've done other geographies, and we want to incorporate those into the East. So our two big updates are for the landscape diversity, we've updated the wetland scoring. And then for the local connectedness, we've updated our data from the 2011 NLCD to the 2019 NLCD. So just as a refresher, there's three main ingredients in our resilient and connected network. There's resilient land, permeable landscapes, which is regional climate flow, and resilient systems and species, which is our confirmed biodiversity. And today I'm really going to be focusing on the resilient land component with the landscape diversity and local connectedness, but I'm going to touch a little bit on the network as a whole as well. Just to refresh your mind here about the resilient sites. So for our resilient sites, we comprehensively map geophysical settings based off of geology, elevation, topography, and hydrography. And then within each geophysical setting, we mapped areas that have the most microclimates, which is our landscape diversity, and that are most connected in the local neighborhood, which is our local connectedness. For the landscape diversity, those are physical factors, and those aren't going to change, as we progress out from the time period that we did the analysis, but we're just updating that with new methods for things that we've learned as we've progressed through the regions. Local connectedness, though, is something that can change as more development happens. The local connectedness will decrease in some areas, and then in areas of restoration, the local connectedness could actually improve. So I'm going to first focus on our update that we made to the landscape diversity. So for landscape diversity, we want to improve the wetland scores. For our first iteration of the resilient sites in the East, we scored wetlands within their geophysical setting. And because it was and wetlands are very flat, so because it was being compared within a setting, these wetlands often turned out to be the flattest features on the landscape, so they received a pretty low landscape diversity score. And what we wanted to do is, we know that wetlands are important for resilience. They provide many different types of habitat. They provide a lot of moisture, moisture in the landscape, especially as the climate may dry. That moisture will be especially important. So we wanted to, based on work that we had done in other regions, we wanted to follow similar methods to boost up that wetland score. And this illustration here is one zoom in of how we did that. So this is in North Carolina, the Baldwin Lake State Forest area. On the far left, you can see the wetlands. So this is an area that has many wetlands. You can see that kind of in this purplish color here. On the map in the center, that's the old landscape diversity score. And if you can kind of, hold on, let me see if I have a pen here. Yeah, let's see, I'm going to actually just use my laser pointer. But in these areas here that have, you can see almost that the areas surrounding the wetlands, because there's a little more topography, come out high, but the wetlands themselves come out average or even below average. So what we did is we brought in the wetland diversity score and really increased the score of wetlands that were especially large and dense. So in this map, you can see that there are areas right here and right here, these larger wetlands that really come out in this new landscape diversity score. So the next factor that we increased was looking at the local connectedness, or we didn't increase it, but we looked at and updated the local connectedness. For our regions as a whole, we did these at different time periods. So they had different, we wanted to use the most up-to-date land cover. So in the East, we used land cover, East and Midwest really, we used the 2011 NLCD. And then in the West and the lower Mississippi, we used the most up-to-date land cover, which is the 2016 NLCD. With the availability of the 2019 NLCD, we wanted to bring into play the most up-to-date land cover from the NLCD. And we were also able to standardize the version of the NLCD. So we did this across the US and updated everything to the 2019 NLCD. And I want to thank the South Atlantic LCC for providing funding to do this. So in the Southeast, between 2011 and 2019, about 1/3% of land was converted from natural or semi-natural hay pasture to agriculture and development. Upon visual inspection, most of the land that was converted was suburban areas on the edges of metropolitan areas. And we also, so we didn't just track development in this, we also did also capture restoration areas. Although these areas, from what we were able to capture from the NLCD change, they were not widespread. It did capture areas of restoration from agriculture or hay pasture back to natural. Yeah, and then there were also small changes in local connectedness that were a result of changes from agriculture in 2011 to hay pasture in 2019. So on the graph on the left here, you can see the decrease in acreage. So we're losing natural and hay pasture lands in the Southeast and increasing agricultural lands, a little bit of low density development, most of the increase was in the medium density development, and a bit of increase in high density development. And then you can see areas in brown here are the actual changes in the local connectedness score between 2011 and then with the update to 2019. And the areas in brown are the areas of decrease. So at this, kind of regional level, you can see the general patterns of development and that decrease in local connectedness.
Melissa, I might jump in with a question while we're on this slide. Question from Liz Cayley's, do solar facilities count as medium, high, or low density development?
Yes, solar facilities, we scored them as high density developments because they often have fences around them and really block natural processes.
That makes sense, thanks.
So I'm just going to go through now two zoomed in examples that you can see what these changes look like on the ground for local connectedness. This first example is around Lake Wylie outside of Charlotte, South Carolina. The top picture shows aerial imagery from 2014. That was the closest I could get to that 2011 vintage, and we're comparing it to the 2020 imagery, which is on the bottom left here. And you can see here that there's a lot of development. This image shows the change in local connectedness in the center. You can see that there's a lot of development on this aerial. You can kind of see it here and down here where that was very natural, and you have a lot more development as we get to the 2020. And with some extended development with this natural area here, now it's largely developed. And you can see that in the local connectedness in the 2011 local connectedness and compare that to the 2019, there's a lot more as you add that change into the local connectedness value. You can see here that there's a lot more of the dark brown under the development, which is the developed land is the gray, and that developed land is the medium and high density development, which is burned in, and that's burned in from the 2019 NLCD. And then our next example is around Cary, North Carolina. Up here on our aerial from 2014, you can see a lot of green over here from the area outside of Cary. And then in 2020, there's a lot more suburban development just kind of on this edge outside of Cary. On our map here in the middle of the change in local connectedness score, you can see it decreases in the brown. And that's consistent with what we're seeing in the aerial photo in 2020. And then if you look at the scores, because it is suburban development, you have some of this light brown here, but it gets much darker and extends farther as we get into the 2020 local connectedness, which is in the bottom left. So these two updates to landscape diversity and local connectedness were done for the region, and we have maps for those, and then we incorporated them into our resilient sites. So landscape diversity and local connectedness are equally weighted, and they go into our resilient sites. And then the color scheme for these are the most resilient areas are in the darkest green. The areas with same thing with landscape diversity, the most diverse areas for landscape diversity or the most connected areas for local connectedness are dark green. The average areas are in yellow, and then the below average areas are in brown. So we combine local landscape diversity and local connectedness, which are each assessed for each geophysical setting, and then we average them together to get the map of resilient sites. So in the areas in green here are the resilient sites, and they're the areas that we would expect to continue to support biological diversity, productivity, and ecological function even as the climate changes. So now that I've given you an overview and an update of our first ingredient, resilient land, I also want to talk a little bit about some updates that we're working on to the RCN as a whole. So as our TNC staff and partners have worked with the RCN, they found some areas in their local geographies that they would like to add or update to the RCN. So here, and I just pulled out what we think is this, what we're going to add in the southeast. So what we're going to do is we're going to have our stable version of the RCN, which is what we've distributed now and what you've been working with. So we're going to add to that the updates to the resilient sites from from the landscape diversity updates and the local connectedness. And then we're going to also add in these regional additions to a regional version of the resilient and connected network. So on this map, the kind of pastel greens and blues are currently in the RCN. And then we're going to add in some regional additions. These are based off of longleaf pine areas that our regional staff have highlighted as important to be in the RCN. So the yellow areas are restorable areas with recognized biodiversity, and they're going to go into our restoration class. And then the dark green areas are areas that are resilient and have recognized biodiversity. They're kind of on the edges of the RCN, so kind of bumping that out a little bit more for areas that were not captured for longleaf pine that we would like to include in the RCN. So, and then this is just another slide to highlight just how these all go together. So for the RCN, where that site resilience, which has the landscape and landscape diversity and local connectedness component, we're gonna, so that overlays with climate flow and biodiversity and forms the RCN. And then this is just a full-on map of the United States simplified resilient and connected network map. And it's three main categories of resilience, flow, and recognized biodiversity. And the darkest areas are the areas for all of those. The light blue areas are areas for just resilience and flow, and the light green areas are resilience and recognized biodiversity. To give you a timeline, so all of these are currently wrapping up, and we wanted to give you a preview in this webinar so that you're excited about them, and so that excited about them when they come out in the next month or two, and that and so that you also know about them because they are being integrated into the Southeast-wide 2022 blueprint. Our Alaska and Hawaii data will be available for download at the end of this month. The resilient sites data, so those updates to landscape diversity and local connectedness, those will be available by the end of February, so next month. The resilient and connected network data will be available for download, which will include both the resilience, the updates to the resilience in the RCN, and the regional updates. Those will be available in February or March. And then it's going to take us a little longer to incorporate all of the data into the resilient land mapping tool. So we're thinking about that for spring, April-ish of this year. So another thing that we've been working on the last year is we've created a new website. And from this website is where you'll be able to access the data. So our new website is crcs.tnc.org. And we have our most up-to-date projects highlighted. And then a couple of nice features to be able to access the data is that we have a whole page on this website for interactive map applications. So from this, you can access the Resilient Land Mapping tool, but you can also access story maps that can describe and walk you through how the resilient sites and the resilient and connected network were created. And we also have a tab on this website to talk about our conservation data. From here, you can find authoritative data sets that you can pull in either to ArcGIS Online projects or into ArcMap or ArcPro projects that you're working on. So hopefully this presentation got you excited to learn more about the Resilient and Connected Network. And we have a variety of reports and media to get you started. We did the analysis region by region, and we have reports for each of the different regions. So if you really want to dive into the methods, you'll be able to find them in reports. And once we release the data for the updates for the landscape diversity and local connectedness, we'll have documents available about the methods of how we did that. And then there's also on our website, there's different kinds of media, whether it's newspaper articles, articles in nature.org, or peer-reviewed publications. You'll be able to find all of those on our website. And if you're interested in accessing the data, there's 3 ways that you can access the data. The easiest is by visiting our Resilient Land Mapping tool. And I have a little zoom in, and I'll talk about that a little bit on the next slide. Kind of the intermediate way of accessing the data is using the ArcGIS Online authoritative data. You can access that through our website at crcs.tnc.org, or if you're an ArcGIS user, either in ArcPro or ArcMap, when you add data from ArcGIS Online, you can just type in a keyword, whether it's local connectedness or resilience, and those data sets should come up, and you can add them to your own projects. And then for the advanced user that wants to download the data is available on our website for download. You can either download it for the entire nation, for particular states, or for regions. And once we have the data finished with all the metadata, will be posted here, so you'll be able to download these updates to the resilience, local connectedness, and landscape diversity. And then I just wanted to highlight here our Resilient Land Mapping tool, because I think it's a great tool to start exploring the data. On the Resilient Land Mapping tool, all of the data is available to look at. And as I said, this will not be updated with the new data until probably spring this year, around April-ish. But you can access all of the old data and view it here. So there's the resilient sites, the resilient connected network, and then all of the component data like landscape diversity, local connectedness, and geophysical settings are available to view. And you can find out more information about each of those individual layers by clicking on the layer name, and it'll get some more information about them. But the coolest thing about the Resilient Land Mapping tool is that it allows you to input a parcel or an area. So you can either draw it on the screen or upload a zipped up shapefile. And then our Resilient Land Mapping tool will compute for you for that parcel the amount of the parcel that's in the resilient and connected network, the components, whether it's resilience, it's resilience score for that parcel, the score for landscape diversity, the score for local connectedness. And then we have a new function of this, is that it also will tell you information about carbon, so both soil carbon and total above ground carbon. And there's a little checkbox that you can click on, and it'll because it takes a little longer, so we wanted to give you the option to get that data or not. And then there's more information as well. If you click on the carbon data sets, it'll tell you where the data is from and give you more information about its sources. So feel free to check out the Resilient Land Mapping tool. It's at maps.tnc.org/resilientland. Great, and with that, I will open it up for questions. And if you have questions after this call or don't get them in, feel free to, you can either email our group at crcs@tnc.org or email me individually at melissa_clark@tnc.org. Yeah, and if you are particularly interested in downloading these updates and want me to make you can email me, and I'll make sure to add you to our distribution mailing list that'll let you know when this data is available.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Melissa. It was a great presentation. Yeah, we can definitely take some time for questions, easily 15-20 minutes to spare, so don't be shy. I see that there's one in the chat box, and then I will call on Ellie, whose hand is up. Christina asked, when you were showing the examples of how local connectedness has been negatively impacted by development, do you have an example you could share of where restoration had increased local connectedness on the converse side?
I was going to add that slide, but I didn't have time. I can speak about it. There were only a couple areas. One of the areas and I checked in on them, all of them, to make sure that, it wasn't a data error, but it was actually really cool to see, especially there was one kind of in middle Florida, just below Orlando, where they had done this large restoration project with forests. And it was really cool to see that it was identified as a restoration area, like through conservation, and then that restoration was actually being picked up by the NLCD. Because if you think about restoration and forest restoration, it does take a while to go from planting to full-on forests. So for that to be able to be measured by satellite imagery was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's awesome to be able to pick up on that signal. Good question, Christina. Ellie, do you want to go ahead and ask yours?
Sure. Hi, I'm a spatial scientist at NatureServe. We use this data set all the time. So thanks for, doing what you do and all the updates. I was wondering, is it safe to perform like change detection analyses with this update? I know you showed, some maps that showed the changes in areas, but like I'm just wondering whether these updates are solely due to the updated NLCD, or are there other methodological changes like the improved wetland score or something where we might need to be careful about comparing different data sets across time to like detect changes rather than changes in methodology?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say that you need to, those are the two things that we've changed, is the wetland score and the local connectedness score. So, and we will provide, I think, with the update, those areas of change in local connectedness, just so that you're aware of like this map here. I think that having this available, let's go to it. This map here, where you can actually see those areas of change in local connectedness, so that you can tell whether it's a change in local connectedness or whether it's just a methodological change in the landscape diversity.
Right. And so the local connectedness and the improved and the wetland scores are both inputs to the RCN, right? And so we would need to, the RCN is usually what we tend to use. And so overall changes in, the new update for that and the older version, we probably wouldn't be able to directly compare them, since one of those updates was to the methodology, right?
Yeah, like I don't think you could strictly use that for change. You would need to parse out the pieces.
Right. Okay. All right. Just wanted to check. Thank you.
And good question. Change detection gets super tricky. We run into that with our indicators too.
It does. Yeah, we do a lot of indicator analysis. So that's why I was asking.
Yeah. Let's see. There was a previous question in the chat that was already addressed, but just in case anybody missed it, someone did ask about whether Puerto Rico is included in the data set, and the answer from Mark was not yet. They haven't found funding for it yet. Let's see. I have another hand up. Let me get.
Puerto Rico would be super fun, though. It would be very much like Hawaii, where we thought a lot about Hawaii, about islands and rain shadows and the wet part of the island, dry part of the island. So if anyone has funding, let us know.
Well, I don't want to speak out of turn, but we're expanding, with our new 2022 Southeast Blueprint approach for SECAS, we're taking on a larger chunk of the continental Southeast, but we do hope to expand our modeling to the Caribbean, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands in 2023. And so that should be something that we should talk about, because it would be great. It might be we could kick something in for that, like we did for this update. So.
That would be great. We're still regretting the fact that both for Alaska and Hawaii, which are our last two, we got these great travel budgets, and we were planning these trips to explore them, and then the pandemic hit. So they were done completely virtually without ever leaving our rooms.
Yeah, that would be a bummer.
Yes.
So Puerto Rico could be funner.
Good excuse for a field trip.
Yes.
This is a great question in the chat from Kirsten. Could you explain the scoop on indigenous lands? It looks like the analyses don't extend into those areas. Could you talk a little bit about your indigenous lands approach?
Yes, that's a great question. And Mark, feel free to, I'll start us off, but feel free to pipe in as well. So we did the analysis for the indigenous lands. So we do have that analysis done, but we wanted to respect the sovereignty of the native people. So we're relying on each of our TNC state offices to have those conversations with the native tribes and communities. And once they have those conversations to determine whether or not it's appropriate to share those lands on indigenous lands. And Mark, do you want to talk a little bit about any communications or collaborations there?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you for that. So we have the federal indigenous lands grayed out on the mapping tool, and masked out in some of the data sets. And it was really at the request of one tribe, and we thought, well, if one tribe is requesting this, maybe we should do it for all the tribes. And then we even went farther. This may be more than you want to know, but it's interesting. And we got census areas and state tribal lands and other things which we put on the map. And that actually didn't backfire, but that brought up a whole morass of new issues about land boundaries and land ownership and different opinions among different tribes. And we have, we really want to figure out how to, how to work with the individual tribes to make them comfortable with the data, and also to incorporate some of their perspective into the land tool. So we've pulled it all back. The federal lands are still on there. There's a password that you can get from us, separately. If you need to turn them off for, an analysis reason in your state, we're happy to provide that, and the tribes are happy for that to happen too. And we've actually had requests from lots of tribes, to use the data and get the password. So, all in all, I think we're at the beginning of a really interesting period, and we're thinking about sort of developing a project with the tribal colleges where we sort of teach Western science, teach them the Western science and the GIS that went into the analysis, and they sort of teach us sort of tribal science and different perspectives on land, and we develop sort of a relationship of how this could work together. So I'm hoping that really goes down, and the thing I've learned in this, sorry I'm going on so long, but the thing I've learned is there's a lot of tribal members who are really interested in GIS and science analysis, and it's kind of cool to see it because we have a lot in common. So.
Yeah, that sounds really exciting. It's great to hear a little bit more about how y'all are navigating that. And it reminds me of a lot of work the Southeast Climate Adaptation Science Center has been doing on kind of co-development of science with tribes. That could be an interesting conversation. Cary Furness with the Southeast Climate Adaptation Science Center does mention they would also be interested in discussing potential expansion to Puerto Rico. So sounds like we've got a lot of food for discussion on that. Chuck Rowe in the chat that anybody who is interested in this sort of topic, conservation planning and climate resilience, may want to attend the Future of Conservation Forum, March 15th through 17th in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Mark Anderson will be speaking there, as will I. So you can register at the North Carolina Botanical Garden website. The link to that is in the chat. So thanks for that, Chuck. Does anybody else have questions for Melissa or Mark? Mark, I see that you've mentioned, I assume that's Mark Magalis. Hi, I figured that was you. He said, I have a few ownership ideas. Do you want to chime in on that?
Yeah, great presentation. I like the approach. It harkens back to a lot of efforts by TNC and others, and even our Forest Legacy program attempted this on a state level basis. So it's good, and it all looks great. You were talking about tribal ownerships, and I wonder, I sit on a lot of groups now representing a nonprofit, and I wonder if your map represents the platinum standard, if we could look at a gold standard and put in industry lands or certified lands, or our membership private landowners own big blocks, and while they might not be federally protected, or even if you use the conservation easement database, you've got that perpetual protection. But for the here and now, it would be nice to maybe have a medium-term protection. I wonder what that layer would look like. So that's one idea. And then the industry partners, NAFO is the National Alliance of Forest Owners, and it includes a lot of what used to be corporate land, TMO and REIT land in their membership. So that's a group, and they're partnering a lot with NICASI, which is an industry-sponsored water quality, water and air, largely by the pulp and paper industry. But they have some wonderful data sets, and I think you could access them, or even the SFI program, which is heavier to Canada in its ownership, but we're talking a substantial millions of acres across the country. So just a few ideas, not that you need more work, but it sounds like this was a labor of love.
It definitely was, but these are great ideas. Can you put some of those in an email and send them to me? Because one of our next steps forward is to put out a dashboard where we can start to track conservation of the network. And right now, and you can see this on the Resilient Land tool, there is a secured lands data set of permanently secured conservation lands. But as you just pointed out, it's kind of it's a subset of sort of the full picture of conservation lands, and we would love to develop that. So,
and the beauty of those folks, they've already gone to the carbon assessment, especially SFI. They're very interested in the ecosystem service metrics and how to put that on it. So they're actively doing that in the background. What's the last one? It'll come to me, but they have access to it in wonderful websites. The final one was wildlife habitat, and NAFO has gone on record in their new strategic plan, is that they'll feature a key habitat partnership on those lands. And so you're seeing a real shift, whether it's for ESG purposes, one would hope, but publicity and also minimizing potentials for further listings. There are a lot of examples, probably one per region, and I think that idea would, fit in well with your purposes. Same type of folks, and they've got bureaucrats at the top trying to figure out and explain what this is, and then they have the technocrats beneath who do all the GIS, and that's I think you'd connect with directly.
Mark, will connect you too via email, so you can have each other's contact information. And
Thanks,
if you wanted to,
thank you, Hillary.
Absolutely.
And I'll shut up for now. Appreciate it.
No, you're good.
No, it's great. Yeah, and it's we would love to get more information on those other types of land ownership and incorporate them into this. Yeah, it's even. Yeah, the secured lands is as you get from different, it's just harder and harder to track. So any data sets or information we can get is great.
And I think just like the tribal lands, they'd be willing to partner if it wasn't going out there publicly. And so that's a pretty exciting thing.
Yeah, that would be very exciting.
So
Thanks.
in my other realm, I'm a emeritus professor at NC State, and of course those folks have a wonderful GIS lab, but I'm sure you're working with some of those in their center, if not a great resource.
Yeah.
I'm guessing you're talking about the basic lab, the Biodiversity and Spatial Information Center, I think.
Yeah, it is the tail that wags our college. It's our biggest program and most research funded. So
Yeah, I think she's since moved on, but I think we had a staff member that got her master's degree with that program. It seemed very impressive.
Well, any other questions for Mark or Melissa? I can probably take one or two more, depending on the time. I will say, those of you who mentioned in the chat that you would like to download the data once it's available, Melissa, I'm just going to shoot you their email addresses just so.
Oh, that would be fantastic.
That might be something you could follow up with them on. You wanted to share the data preliminarily, or just share the link once it's up.
I will.
So I have Amy Nathanson and Cindy Simpson down for that. If you're also interested in the download, feel free to drop it in the chat and I will get your contact information to Melissa. I'll pause one more time for questions. Well, you all think I'm just writing down the folks who wanted to be added. Thanks. All right, well, hearing no more, I'm gonna just share my screen again, and turning off my video is not what I wanted to do. I wanted to hit the share screen button. Just wrap up with a quick preview of next month's webinar and then share some updates. So next month, we're going to be hearing from Hugh Sullivan with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency about the latest results from the National Coastal Condition Assessment. As many of you all may know, the Coastal Condition Assessment is a nationwide survey of estuaries and the nearshore waters of the Great Lakes that looks at consistent indicators of human health and ecosystem health. And this is a data set that we've been using in the South Atlantic blueprint for many years. And our estuarine coastal condition indicator, we are expanding that indicator southeast-wide in our new 2022 Southeast Blueprint approach. So we will be using this data across the Gulf and the Atlantic estuaries. And so we're very excited about the release of the latest results from this survey, which were gathered in 2015. So Hugh's going to talk about the survey design, how they work with partners to maintain the quality of their data, describe some of the key indicators, and he'll talk about these 2015 results and any changes that have been found from 2015 compared to the previous surveys. He's also going to wrap up talking about the indicators that they've measured in the 2020-2021 sampling period and talk about some of the future updates that they have planned. So we're excited to hear more about that. So that'll be February 17th, same time, same connection information as today. And then I do have a number of staff updates for you as we kick off this new year. I wanted to make everybody aware that Mallory Martin did retire as SECAS coordinator at the end of 2021. Very sad for us, very exciting for him. Obviously, we're very lucky to have Rua as our acting coordinator in the meantime, while we finish the process of hiring a new coordinator who we hope to start in mid-February. I should be able to share more information with you all about that next month. So definitely look for more in the newsletter and in next month's web forum. So that's the news on Mallory. We're also well underway in the process of developing this 2022 Southeast Blueprint that I mentioned. So this is an effort to improve the consistency of the methods and the data that underlie the Southeast Blueprint. So instead of stitching together so many sub-regional plans, we're going to be using this consistent approach across most of the Southeast, and we're calling that blueprint the base blueprint because it's going to form the base of most of the Southeast Blueprint. Right now, we're in the stage of developing indicators, and we have a lot of great indicator improvements, many that are being expanded southeast-wide from the South Atlantic Blueprint, and some more unique sub-regional indicators that we're bringing in from other partnerships like the joint ventures. So we'll be wrapping up indicator development and all our review teams and modeling in the end of February so that we can start running our prioritization, start running zonation in March, and that's all building toward workshops that we have planned for late spring, where we will be releasing the draft blueprint priorities for review and feedback from y'all. So definitely stay tuned for more information on the workshops. We still have a lot of details to iron out, but we'll definitely be getting those draft priorities in front of you all to get your feedback. We also have a new event calendar on the SECAS website that I wanted to let everybody know about. You might have seen this in either of the past SECAS or South Atlantic newsletters. So this is where I would encourage you to get in the habit of looking for information on this web forum series, as well as the recurring Raleigh, North Carolina area climate and conservation coffee event. And so this is all building toward this transition that we're working on toward Southeast Blueprint 2022, where we're going to be migrating a lot of South Atlantic specific resources over to SECAS. And if you're interested in reading more about our plans for those South Atlantic resources, I would point you toward my blog from last November, where I got into a lot more detail, but I wanted to highlight that as we move toward this Southeast Blueprint in 2022 that's going to use these consistent methods and indicators, that new blueprint is going to essentially take the place of the standalone South Atlantic blueprint. And so to make that happen, this Third Thursday web forum is going to go over to SECAS. A lot of the website content will go over to SECAS. And so I just want to prepare everybody for those changes and explain that that's why you might have seen some tweaks to the slide deck if you're a recurring web forum participant. One of those would be this slide, how to get more involved in the blueprint. So I'm pointing you toward more SECAS specific channels from here on out. To sign up for the SECAS newsletter, you can do that at secassoutheast.org on the footer of any page. You can connect with SECAS staff or SECAS partners, explore the Southeast Blueprint. We would love to get your feedback and to help you use the blueprint to strengthen a proposal or to inform a decision. That's why we're here. And I want to reassure everybody that, the gist of the blueprint, data-driven strategy with user support staff available to help you, none of that is changing as we make this shift. It's just going to really eliminate a lot of the confusion of juggling the South Atlantic blueprint and the Southeast blueprint and how they're different and when you might use one over another. So I hope that you all will agree that that's really going to simplify things and streamline them in terms of communication. So we're excited about this next step and would love your feedback on that as we navigate this transition. So with that, I will pause again for questions, either for me or for Mark and Melissa again. I see that Cary has shared in the chat that there is an open climate data science workshop coming up. If that interests you, check out the link in the chat. All right, hearing no questions, thank you all so much for tuning in. Melissa, I really appreciate the great presentation, and Mark, you as well, your help with questions. I hope to see you all in February and look for an email from me, Mark Magalos, and then I will be sending folks contact information to Melissa who wanted that, that download link. Thanks, everybody.
Great. Thank you, Hillary.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.